Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Monday session. And before, Donna, I wanted to, I think next Monday is a holiday, perhaps.
Oh,
So we
that's
may
right.
need
Yes.
to, we just letting you know, we're not going to have a session next Monday. Okay, so we'll put that out there. I was just talking to y'all, sharing, Donna sharing our website, and we have our upcoming seminars for Upward Bound. You want to check those out. Those are an allowable cost. We also, right now, I was just telling y'all, I've been busy all morning working on APRs. And do we have anybody waving back at us? I want to make sure you can hear us okay. Yes, thank you, Stephen. I appreciate that. Happy New Year. Yes, Happy New Year. And then, Donna, if you want to scroll down a little bit more on that free trial. I've been seeing, Donna, a lot of people signing up for the free trial to get the first session of our grant writing workshops for Talent
Hmm.
Search and EOC. You can get the first session for free. So you can check it out to see if you like the platform, you like the resources that you get before you dive completely into purchasing the whole package. I believe it's $500 for each one. And then you also, that's an unallowable cost because you can't use grant funds to get grant funds. We also have the umbrella regulations, though, that are impact all TRIO programs. That one is an allowable cost because it's considered professional development. And so, set up on the same sort of platform. If you like the way that's set up, we've been getting a lot of requests for folks using it for onboarding for new staff. And I said, hey, it's actually good for existing staff too to review it once in a while. So you can check that out as well. If you purchase the whole course, you can see that right there. It's for the EOC and Talent Search proposal writing courses, the additional sections that you don't get for free, you could purchase there. And then that's unallowable, but costs. But then professional development courses there, we have several of them. We have Veterans Upward Bound, SSS, Talent Search, Upward Bound, and EOC ready to go. If you want to check those out, they're great for onboarding on demand. You can be old school too if you don't want to take the course and you just want the recordings and links to the Google Drive with our resources. Some people lately have been wanting to do the course because it's more self-paced, and also individuals that go through it get a certificate and a badge at completion if you want to add it to their HR records or check off as formal onboarding. Okay. And you also have access to that for a year. Okay. We update them annually. All right. Anything else, Donna, we wanted to talk about? Putting it out there in the shop. I
That
think
I can
that's
think of.
pretty much it. And you can always look at all our browser things there if you want to check it out. Remember, we not only help people write proposals, that's what we're, I think, known for, but we also want to let you all know that not only do we help people get funded, but then we help you stay funded by providing the majority of our services now are allowable cost. We used to do mainly just grant writing, which was mainly, which is completely unallowable. As you see, we have a majority of services here, and those services, the majority of them are allowable cost. You may think you don't have any carryover right now, but if you have positions that are still open, or some of y'all are just recently got hired, or this is our last year of Talent Search and EOC funding, you can't carry over anymore. So start looking at your budget and seeing where, if you've got extra funds and personnel, that you can move over to other professional development, and we can help you out there. Okay. That being said, let's talk about the proposal. Either Talent Search or EOC. Don, if you get a chance, can you launch that poll about how many people we have that are in Talent Search here for from Talent Search and how many from EOC? That would be great.
Sure. Should I stop
And
sharing so you can
yes,
share?
yes, you can. You can, and I will start sharing my. Let's see if we got it going on here. I hope. Fingers crossed, y'all. And I would just want to start off by, asking if there's any questions whatsoever that folks have. Can you see my screen, Donna? Is it
Yes,
Canva?
I
Okay.
can see the objectives section from
Okay,
the.
great. And I'm going to move it over because I have those three screens again. I don't know why I do that to myself. I thought the more screens I had, the better, but it's actually the opposite. I'm finding out real fast. So, Talent Searcher EOC, we'll see if you don't mind, those of you that have joined us, letting me know where you're coming from. I'm assuming we have a lot of talent search. Now, the objective section, the way I'm going to present, yes, I am sharing what would have been covered, what is being covered in our talent search
Um,
proposal writing workshop. Are you okay?
Lisa, I'm not
Yes.
seeing the objective section anymore. I'm seeing like
Oh,
the folder with all of the
no, I'm
files
just
in
trying.
it.
Let me bring it up. Let me do the presentation mode. Oh, you know what? Because I changed screens. Once again, trying to be cool, changing the screens. Let me see if it works now. Okay. I'm going to stay co-host, get rid of that. It's because I changed the screen so I can see better. And now let me stop sharing. I had it going on, y'all. We have 60%. Yeah, we have more talent search folks. Not a problem though, because once I figure out how to share the screen, I will be presenting the objective section and covering both. So let me see if I can now bring it up. How about now?
Yes, that's it.
Oh, okay.
Yay.
Yay. And y'all let me know if you have any questions in general about anything the proposal wise. I just wanted to have a topic in place. If there are no burning questions right now, I mean, put them out there at any time because this is tailored to address anything anyone out there may have a question about. I'm ready to try to answer during this session. Thank you, Donna. We do have the 56, I think to 36, and we have a few that haven't answered, but there's some that are both. Okay, thank you. I will say that I don't know when this is going to drop. Like I said last week, it's the number one question we get. I do know that they probably need to approve the budget, right? They're still in continue, is it going to be another continuing resolution or what? I don't think it can be. So I think we'll know them whenever that happens. But I do believe it's going to be a very short turnaround, like 30 days. So that's why we're preparing here as though it can drop at any time. That's the mindset I need to have. That's what I need to dedicate, ensuring that the data collection, which takes the longest amount of time, is being done now. And that's where you should be in that case, is wrapping up your data collection. You could crank out the rest of the sections in a couple of days or in a week. You don't want to have to do that. But the one thing that you cannot collect and make decisions on at such a short period of time is the data collection. Okay, so let me know if y'all have any questions out there. But what I wanted to do is cover or have a discussion about the objectives, because that's the section that is the easiest one to lose points. And last time around, we lost points. And I'm learning from that. And, after so many years of getting perfect scores, realizing that, initially you get angry and then you realize, yeah, they were right. I got lucky all these previous years that I had never lost points, but I see so clearly now the mistakes that I made. And I'm going to try to avoid them. So I'm going to share those with you, and that they impact both Talent Search and EOC, even though I'm sharing with you the PowerPoint that we had, or the slide deck that we developed for our grant writing workshop for Talent Search. The one for EOC is very similar. You do not have access to this in the Google Drive, because this is something that you have to purchase, but I am sharing it and you can see it from the recording, but you will not have these actual materials unless you have already attended and have access to that Google Drive, or you're thinking about, or you've already purchased the online course, right? So you will not have the handouts for this in the Google Drive, but you will have the recording, okay, of this. But I just wanted to share with you all my advice, my recommendations on the objectives, along with what was stated in the program application for 2021. I don't think things are going to change. All right, this is worth 8 points, but it's a precious 8 points. And the development of it, or how well you do, actually starts in the needs section. Okay, so that's why the objective section is what I actually do last. I don't do an order, I start working on the needs section first. It just so happens to be the very first section, but that doesn't mean that I start right away working on objectives. I actually save the objective section for the dead last thing. It's kind of the wrap up of everything, because I need to have all my baseline data from the needs section in order to go ahead and set the objectives. And I need to have my plan of operation done so I can link it to that as well. So it's a good place to wrap everything up. And then plugging in the percentages, I do, last, and I have sometimes go back and forth, set it up, and then come back a couple of days later to set it. What you don't want to do is be working until the very last minute and then plug in some percentages without getting a chance to let them sit, come back and make a decision. Because I will sometimes go back and forth. And I tell my clients, look, this week, I think we should go with this percentage because of what the baseline is. But then a week later, I might have heard something or someone said something, or I just had a feeling that it was either too high or too low, and I may come back and modify it. Okay. Just putting out there, letting you know what I mean from that. And I can't really go and check. I don't want to lose my place, Donna. So if you see if there's a question, or Leah, if you can see the questions and let me know if there's something that I can wait till the very end or something that has something directly to do with what we're talking about right now. Okay. You would let me know, because I'm afraid to lose my place. It took me a struggle to get here, so I don't want to mess it up.
There is a question. I guess I could go ahead and it says, if I am requesting data from our college's institutional research office, how far back should the data go? 1 year or 5 years?
Okay, so the data for the needs section for Talent Search and for EOC doesn't come from your institutional research. It's not college data. Are you maybe saying that you ask those folks to pull census and target school or target area data for you? Or are you asking for them to pull institutional data? But Talent Search and EOC doesn't pull institutional data. Like for McNair or SSS, yes. But when I do Talent Search or EOC, maybe I can ask the institutional research folks to help me pull data, but they would have to pull data from the census or from the target school or the target school area. It would be totally not involving any institutional data like their graduation rates, their admission rates, or persistence rates. Then the second part of your question is, how far back do you go? Most of the questions I know in Talent Search, and the understanding is in EOC, you need to find the most recent data available. Okay, so when you look at target area data, depending on how big or how small your target area is, you kind of have to, your hands are tied as to go to the census to find out for that area, for that target area, whether it's big, rural, urban, whatever, this is the latest available data. And you want to state that in your tables. Because when you compare it to your target area to state or national data, since they're different locations or entities, they may be on a different timeline, right? Sometimes it's harder to get annual national data at times. It lags behind. So if we're looking for the national graduation rate, right, you may have to go by whatever your target schools, the latest available data for your target schools. And then when you can compare it to the state graduation rate, well, they're not on the same timeline as y'all are. So it may be a little off. And then national may be another year off. But what you do is you make sure at the bottom of your tables that you state that this is the most, please note that this is the most recent available data for each comparison area. It would look really weird and be unusual that all your target area, when compared to the state and national, are all for the same year. It doesn't happen because people are not, these entities are not collecting data all annually, but you want to go by the latest available. Okay. I know back in the day, there used to be like a trend. They used to say, give us a trend for the past 3 years. And I still see some people turning that in when I go to read. And I go, I wonder why they're giving me the data for the last 3 years. No, I just need it for the latest available data. So the latest 1 year of data. Okay. Now, granted that some of the objectives are talking about, 6 years ago, what was the rate of students that 6 years later graduated with a college degree? Well, obviously, I'm going to look at the cohort of what what y'all just did for Talent Search. I believe it's 2018. You went back in time, but you just followed that one group. So no longer should you be providing 3 years worth of data. It's got to be the latest available data for each comparison area. And just to recap, your institutional research at your college would have to look at census data for you, target area data for you, or target school or national educational data, everything off of campus. They wouldn't be pulling any data for campus, their own campus, okay? Just to be clear for that. All right, so just very briefly, EOC and Talent Search have, different objectives. EOC has the four objectives, 2 points each, and then we have here for Talent Search the breakdown for the objectives. So all these baseline, whether it's Talent Search or EOC, you have to make sure that by the end of your needs section, by the time as a reader I get to the end of your needs section, you should have clearly, specifically, obviously, to the point that it's annoying, brought it to my attention, screaming to my attention, that I would have seen the baseline for all of these objectives in the needs section. So you have to force it. So secondary school persistence, there is actually a table, that they request, tell us the rate of students that go on to the next grade level. So they specifically ask for that. So it's hard not to provide that information, right? And secondary school graduation, they also ask, specifically for that information. So that's, hard not to miss, but you want to make sure you provide it and that you put in parentheses baseline for objective B or A. I mean, just be very obvious, okay? Secondary school graduation with rigorous, that is also later, it doesn't go in order necessarily with the regular graduation, but when the needs section in Talent Search asks for rigorous, that's where you bring that up and you state what the baseline is. And then actually before that, they want to know about the education, the college enrollment. So it's hard to miss that. And then about the college degree attainment. And some of us, just over the weekend, I was looking at a needs section and I wrote to the client, I said, you know what, when we looked at the census data for how many people have do not have a bachelor's degree, it wasn't showing need from the target area compared to the state or national rates. So I said, you're not showing need in this area when we look at census data. Well, you're going to have to probably, for Talent Search, use the performance that you all just did on your Talent Search APR for that objective. So you use your own data in this case to make a case that there's still a need, because I just had to, everybody out there who has a Talent Search grant that's old enough to, the grant is old enough that where it requires you to explain what happened to your 2018 students that went to college for the first time 6 years later. Did they get a bachelor's degree or associate's degree? You have that data. So in this case, I told the client, you're going to have to use that, because if we use the census, which it doesn't say you have to use census, but that's traditionally what we use. And in your case, there's no need for everybody 25 years and older. Well, why don't we use the baseline of your own students and say this is a sample tracking of students that attended the target schools that were served. Let's just say it, because if we left it alone and just use census, you would lose full points there and also in the objective section. So we have no choice but to use your own performance and explain it, and actually explain to the reader that this is a more appropriate baseline because it's looking at students who are the right age, the same age as Talent Search participants will be in the future. Whereas a census asking about students 25 years or older was talking about everybody in the target area that was 25 and older. So it wasn't even, even though we've been used to using that and can use it, it's never been apples to apples. It's always been apples to oranges. It's a different age group. So in this case, we're taking what initially is a negative, that the census is not showing that there's a need, because it says not enough, there's more people in the target area that have a college degree over the age of 25. We've turned it into actually showing need if we use our own performance of our existing Talent Search. Now, if you don't have an existing Talent Search program, then that's just another disadvantage to not be able to use that. Donna, do we have any questions that relate directly here? Again, I'm afraid to switch over because I'll lose my place.
We do have a bunch of questions.
Okay.
Let me just start at the beginning. Do you recommend 10% or 15% above the average to call it ambitious? I did get all points on the grant writing for the objectives. I was afraid about my post-secondary enrollment. I did not get all of my points a time or two for not meeting my post-secondary enrollment on my APR. Is it a hard one for us to, it is a hard one for us to make. It really is the only one I have had trouble with.
Yep. Yeah, so a couple of things there. So I'm gonna tell you that for right now, I feel comfortable with either, and it depends on the objectives. Don't you hate this answer? It depends, but it does depend, and it's not the average; it's the baseline. So first, in your needs section, you have to figure out, and for EOC, just to wrap things up with the wording, EOC in your needs section, it really never comes out in the questions in the needs section, forcing you to come up with all the four baselines that you need for the objectives that y'all have. So in the last question of the needs section for EOC is where I strongly recommend you force mention of how many people in the target area do not have a high school diploma or GED. That's your baseline. How many people do not apply, or the low number of people that do apply for financial aid in the target area compared to something national or state. The same thing with college admissions. How many people, the low percentage of people that apply for admissions, and then the low number of adults that go to college. It doesn't ask you that like it does in talent search needs section. So you have to force it in the last part of the question. So again, to answer this question, when you get your baselines, then I'm going to tell you that depending on the objective, because like you just said, some objectives are easier than others, right? To me in EOC, the hardest objective is that first one, getting people that don't have a high school diploma that are dropouts, getting them to get a GED. I can get somebody probably in a GED program or back in school, but that's not the objective. That's an activity. In order for me to help you get a GED, I first have to get you into a program. But then depending on how much, you have to catch up on, it could be up to 16 months before you actually graduate with a GED. So to me, for EOC, that is a very difficult objective to meet. Okay. Getting someone to actually get a GED or a high school diploma within a year is tough. So I'm already thinking that from my baseline, it's probably going to be low. And so I'm not going to go too much higher because that's a hard one to meet. Talent search, the one that's tough for me to meet has always been, is that rigorous secondary school program of study, especially since I had to pick purposely the most rigorous definition available, not because I wanted to, but because I had to show that there's a need. And that's what we're struggling with right now in talent search is a lot of people say, well, in this state, which is Texas too, one of the definitions is that regular equals rigorous. So it's the same. Well, that's great on your APR, but it's not great when you're trying to show need. So usually the definition that I must use, I don't want to, but I have to use it to survive, to get refunded, is usually the hardest definition. So when I go to find the baseline for that, it's really, really super low. So again, I don't want to go too much higher because it's tough and it's already so low, right? And then that's the objective to tell this person, that's the objective thinking in the future. I'm thinking, I'll probably never meet it. I'm going to try, but I'd rather die later than now. So if you start thinking about trying to make that objective perfect so that you can meet it, you may lose some points with the readers. So you can't think that way. You have to think, let me just get fun, show the need, and then I'll deal with it later. If I don't meet that objective, okay. But if I try too hard to set it so I can meet it, it may not be high enough and I may lose points and not have the chance to, either get the objective later on the APR or never get it. But I can still survive. It's only worth 1 point. I'm sorry, it's worth 1.5 on your PE points because it's so hard, right? So it's not worth 3 points on your PE points toward your next proposal anyway. The other one that's difficult for me is post-secondary degree attainment. Yes, that to me is my most difficult. So usually the baseline is low, so I don't go too much higher, but that's another one that I do my best to try to meet, but I don't try to set it ahead of time to make sure that I can meet it later because it's two different things, get funded and then worry about meeting the objective later. I know that sounds crazy, right? But you have to think that way because if you pull that too much in, that can cause you to possibly lose points with the readers because they're not thinking about the future. They don't know as much as you know. We know too much, right? So then that being said, I would not go anymore, depending on the baseline and depending on the objective. But if you were to ask me, just a short answer would be no more than between 10 and 15 points higher points. You said percentage points higher than the baseline. Okay. As my general rule, that's what helped us a lot with SSS. Okay. So Donna, I'm going to see if you have any more questions related to that. I'll just go off of the questions as I go through this.
Okay. Here's one about EOC. What if our colleges do not track inquiries for our objective denominator? Why can't we just use those 25 and older who are eligible to enroll into college?
Are they talking about post-secondary enrollment?
I'm not sure.
Okay. So they're saying that I wish I could read it. Could you read it again real quick? Sorry.
What if our colleges do not track inquiries for our objective denominator? Why can't we just use those 25 and older who are eligible to enroll into college?
Okay. I'm assuming they're asking about getting the baseline for those students that, what percentage of adults enroll in college in the target area? Your target school, your institution probably doesn't cover that. So you're gonna have to go to the workforce center and find out if they have any records or any data that you can pull, or go to the GED centers and ask them, look, of all the people that graduate with GEDs, how many have you seen? What percentage of them would you say have enrolled in college? Okay. Or I don't know if there's a census for it, but see, you have to, it's not just about what your college is saying, because you're serving the target area. So that's why the data collection for EOC is super, super hard and takes a long time, because you have to find the right source. Sometimes people do a newspaper or an article on it or a study about it. That's why I say go to the workforce center and tell them, look, I'm writing to show that we have a high number, or there's a very low number of adults that apply for admissions or that enroll in college. Can you help me and direct me to that? I don't know if the higher education coordinating board of your state may have it for your area, but that's why it's challenging. But yes, some people have utilized their institution's numbers, but they would have to. You just said they don't track it for adults over a certain age, so you're going to have to go and find the data from the community. United Way reports, community assessments. Depending on what city you are, sometimes they do an overall assessment of the city, like a needs assessment, and look under education to see if they have those statistics. Okay. It's tough. I'm not going to tell you it's tough. I can't tell you to go to one place because it depends where you're at. Is it rural? Is it a big place? Or who you need to talk to get the baseline for those 4 objectives for EOC. Next question, Donna.
For talent search, I was going through a check for the trigger words. What do we do when a trigger word, specifically the word barrier, is actually in the proposal? Example 6, other indicators of need. Extremely high unemployment rates in target area counties. 5, rural isolation, technological barriers, underfunded target schools. 6, barriers to equitable access.
Okay, so number 6, I mean, that number 6, that I don't think that question is there. I don't recall the wording of equitable, that last thing, Donna. So I need to confirm if they mentioned talent search, and I know question number 6 talks about the other problems. And I think it talks about the problems and barriers. So the key word was barriers, right? That indicated a trigger. We cannot change the question, but in your response, instead of saying these are barriers faced by homeless or foster care youth, you can change that wording, and you can find there's alternatives to those words. I go to ChatGPT all the time and go, instead of using the word barrier, what other word can I use that has the same meaning but is in compliance? And that's what I've been doing a lot, is cleaning up a lot of that language that I've been using for the last 20 years and noticing. Now, again, you can't change the question, okay? Not yet, until they change it. But it doesn't mean in your response you have to use those same words. we can use another word for barrier that is not going to flag and still answer the question. So I can still talk about these barriers. And when you talk about the barriers, something to do about language, no, I wouldn't bring that up. It's got to be something to do with their economic situation or because they are going to be first generation college students. Okay, so that's what you have to be aware of also in that context. So you can't change the question, but you can certainly change your answer. And you don't want to use a word like equity. I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, if in any of the and EOC and talent search, let me know if I'm wrong in any of the questions, it does ask for equity in the question. I know it says talk about barriers. Sometimes it says disadvantage. And instead of disadvantage, I always say EOC eligible or talent search eligible. Okay, so let me know or send me an email specifically where you see that language in the question. Or if I'm wrong, that there's other places where it says equity. Now, make sure that I've inherited or I've looked at proposals from programs that have been around for 20, 25 years. And when I'm reading, I look at the question and I notice that the question that they put in there or had in there is worded differently than the actual question, what it is now in the RFP. And that's because over the years, the questions look similar, but the wording has changed slightly. And if it's an existing grant, maybe not y'all, but maybe whoever did it before just kept the same question because it looked similar and didn't change it. So I would beg for you all to, when you're looking at your 2021 submission, make sure that the questions match exactly with the 2021 RFP, which is in the Google Drive, to make sure, because that happens sometimes, Donna. People, the questions change, but they keep it the old format and the old question stays in the narrative, because I don't remember that being in there, but let me know. Any other questions there, Donna, regarding that?
There's another one about setting objectives. Someone says, if we feel comfortable where we are with minimal objectives, do we increase, especially if we have been close in areas for talent search? For example, rigorous area was 40% and we were at 41% this year.
Oh, so your rigorous diploma was set, the objective was set at 40, and you're thinking about before, and you met it. But remember, it doesn't have to do, let me get to the important part here. And this is why sometimes it makes, y'all are too closely involved in this. Isn't it crazy that I mean that y'all are thinking like directors, which you need to, right? And you're remembering this is how we did. And should I keep it that way? Or, we've been doing well, struggling. And I have to tell you, keep that in the back of your mind. But let me get to the part where we talk about these things to consider. You have to go by what's the baseline. So for example, you were telling me our objective was at 40% in the past and we did 41%. And I'm like, okay, great. But I don't care what your objectives are set at right now. That doesn't play any mind of what you set your objectives. And only a little bit do I care how you actually performed on it. Would I care 90% of my wanting to know to help you? I got to know what the baselines are now. What are they now? Because we got to come up with new numbers. It's like when you go and get blood work done once a year, at the doctor's office, we need to set your prescription or your medications based on the latest, it's good to find out how you've been doing and what you're doing, but we have to get a whole new set of baseline percentages. For talent search, we need those 5 baselines, for one for each objective. For EOC, we have to find those 4 baselines for their 4 objectives. Then, based on the new data, you have to set your objectives based on that. And you kind of, in a little percentage, think about, well, gosh, it's now 30, or, the baseline is 30. I set it at 40 before. We've been doing 41%. Okay, I'm going to leave it at 40. But that's only because the new data shows that the current baseline for the percentage of students that get a college degree after 6 years is at 30%. Do you see what I'm saying? You have to go by what is the new data. All right. And then and then base it off of that completely, almost completely, thinking a little bit about how you're doing on it currently. Okay. If you try to compare right away, well, let me set it on what we're doing right now. No, it's got to be first about the new baseline. Okay. Donna, is there any other questions regarding that?
There's another one about objectives. Did you say we can use the 2018 6-year graduation rate for existing talent search projects for baseline for post-secondary degree attainment?
I say you can use it as a Hail Mary if you're the traditional method of basing it off of the census for adults the age over 25 and over is not showing a need. Okay. The readers expect the census. It's not only because 9 out of 10 proposals they get say, oh, according to the census, only 10% of the adults, in the area or individuals 25 years or older have a college degree. Because traditionally, that's the only way we had, right? The only baseline we could find. If I was a new talent search program, I don't have an existing program, right? So I didn't have the chance to track it. So I'd be stuck doing that and hoping that it shows a need. So that's my first choice to do the traditional route. But I just brought up an example of how one of my clients, when we did the traditional route, it wasn't showing a need. The target area, the adults were actually doing better. There were more adults in the target area or individuals 25 years or older, and this is for talent search, that had a degree, a bachelor's degree. There was no need. So I'm like, what do we do now? And then I said, oh, well, we have no choice but then to use and talk about a random sampling of students that we've tracked. Only because they had no choice. Would it be my first choice? No. That's what I want to be very clear about. It's a Hail Mary, because if I didn't go that route, I would lose complete points in the need section on that part of that question. And also I would lose it in the objective section because the reader would say, hey, you didn't show a need. And so, I can't help you out there. Okay. So I want to be clear on that. That's a solution to a problem that we're facing. Problem is they weren't showing need. So that's why you have to hurry up and find the baseline for your objectives ASAP. And not only find the baseline, but the baseline has to show a need when you compare it to something else, when you compare it to the district or to the state or national or all three or two of them, whatever. You have to show that you're doing worse in all those 5 baselines than somebody else, than some other location or entity, right? And that takes the longest time. Okay. Once you do that, then you can talk about setting the objectives. Okay. Based off of the baseline that shows a need. Some people tell me, well, here's my baseline. And I go, well, that's nice, but your baseline is not showing a need. We have to go a step back and, troubleshoot. And like in this case, they said, well, our baseline would be this. I said, the problem is not with your baseline. I know you found it, but your baseline isn't showing a need. So for that example, I say, we're going to have to go to plan B, which is to go ahead and use your own students. And the thing was like, can we do that? I said, we have no choice. We have no choice. They say not to, but I can word it or state that this is actually more appropriate in a sense because it's about students the right age range than before. So I can take a negative and make it a positive, try to, but I don't want to do that if I don't have to. Okay. Any other questions related to that, Donna?
Yeah, you may have just answered this one, but baseline based upon where we have performed or where baseline has been for the state and district. For example, kids in our program are higher than state and overall district baselines.
And when you talk about that objective, if we're talking about post-secondary, yes, I believe it, but you have no other choice. If that question feeds off of the previous one, or if it's for that last objective, yeah, I mean, because they've received services, but you're hoping that your students still show a need. The performance of your students may be great compared to where they started from, or compared to the target school. Maybe you broke the record for the college graduation rate that was there before, but it could still be lagging behind the national rate or that compared to another school district or set of schools that are private. You see what I'm saying? You could still be awesome and meet that objective and be great, but still be lagging behind somebody else. So yes, that baseline still has to show you lagging. So plan B is that we're assuming I haven't seen their APR numbers yet, but this is terrible. I'm glad they met the objective for that post-secondary, but I'm hoping that although they met it, it's still lower than if we compare it to another entity. Okay, to do that, then we can show that there's that they're lagging behind. Okay, so yes, so in some of and I'm not saying in all of these objectives, but you're right. If you could pull out from the target schools, if there was any way that you could pull persistence for everybody except your students that you serve, great. But I don't know if they can do that. If that's the way it should be done across the board, when you're in Talent Search and you're looking for the baseline of the current target schools you're in, and you're asking the target school people to give you the persistence rate of everybody who goes on to the next grade level, you should be telling them, or here's our students, please exclude them for that. But that's very difficult for them to do. So you see, you're already kind of doing that where you've included your students. Okay, but in this case, you're hoping that although your performance is great and that you may have met that objective, that your students are still lagging behind. And it sounds crazy, but remember, the whole purpose of the needs section is to let the readers and the funding entity realize, hey, there's a need here. I know I've been here 20 years, 15 years, and we're meeting our objectives, but our students are still lagging behind. If your students are no longer lagging behind, all the other students, and you can't pull them apart, then you won't get funded because you can't show a need. You have to show the need, right? So that's why we try not to base it on our students' performance. But when you're stuck in a corner where you have no performance to base it on, you go with that and you're hoping that their performance, although it's great for the project, great for the target school, is still lagging behind some other entity. Okay. Do you have another question, Donna?
Yes, this is an EOC question.
Okay.
I live in an area where Spanish is the most spoken language, and in our questions, we have a section for limited English proficiency. Should we include the percentage of limited English proficient?
Nope.
And the
I don't want
number
to
of
hear
residents who
anything.
speak other languages?
I don't want to hear anything about that. I don't want to see anything about that. Nothing about it. You talk about low income and first generation college status. It's no longer to be now internally in your policies procedures manual. You talk about, yes, we're going to have that available, blah, blah, blah. But federally on these documents, no, you will get flagged, you will get triggered, it will get canceled. You don't want to risk that. I'm not saying you can't do it and have those options where if someone is wanting to apply and it's easier to do that, but you don't want to put it in here or say that it is a reason to show need. Okay. I want to be very clear about that. Someone innocently, like before, put in there that applications will be available in Spanish and English. I said, take it out. I'm not saying don't do it. I just said, don't put it in your federal proposal. And it's not going to be looked at favorably as a need. Focus on, take it, deconstruct it or dig a little deeper as to, other things that based on their economic status and lack of education, focus on that, but not on the language thing. Okay.
There are a couple of questions about quality of personnel. Do you want to go ahead and do those or?
I'll hold on to this a little later. Okay. I'll get through here. Thank you. And let me know if anything pops up related to objectives. All right. So just real quick for EOC or talent search, you don't want to add any objectives, no matter how you want to, or somebody else tells you, I think it'll be better. That's an additional goal, possibly. For example, EOC, I think you should brag about how many dropouts, people that don't have a high school diploma or a GED. I think you should brag about the percentage of those that you get into a program, into a GED or any kind of program. It's not an objective to get them into the program. It's an activity, but you should have a goal in your evaluation plan that says a certain percentage of our people that drop out, we're going to try to get into a program, period. I know it doesn't count toward the objective because the objective only counts when they actually get a GED or a high school diploma. But that's not an additional objective. That's an internal goal. All right. And the other thing is that they must be both ambitious, based only on data in the needs section, and attainable based on things that you're going to do in the plan of operation. So the objective section is like a review of your needs section and all that baseline data once more. You rehash it, but then you're also giving the reader a preview of the plan of operation and a specific listing of services that you're going to implement to meet each of the objectives. Okay, you just can't say, oh, we're going to do everything for everyone to meet all of the objectives. You get a little bit more specific in saying that these two services, and you don't have to go into detail about what the services are, A through B. You do that in the plan of operation, but you just say something like, helping them fill out a FAFSA is a specific activity for EOC toward that objective on how many people apply for FAFSA, that kind of thing. In Talent Search, that's a goal. The percentage of seniors that complete a FAFSA is a goal to get to the ultimate objective of how many enroll. Okay. So again, and that's where I would bring it up that, one of the things that we're going to do in order to work on that objective on college enrollment, and this will work for both EOC and Talent Search, is the number of people or the percentage that we're going to help apply, for Talent Search students to college as well. They're no longer an objective in Talent Search. When I started in Talent Search, it was an objective, then it became an activity. The objective is how many get to college, but we have to break it down by activities to help that are specific to help people, students enroll in college. So that's where it would be talking about why it's attainable. Okay. So you want to say that, look, it's a struggle and it's going to be ambitious because of the data that I'm repeating from the needs section, but we're going to make it happen because there is a listing of specific services for each objective. Okay. Don't mention past performance on your APR. I mean, you can think about it, but it's got to be at the very back of your mind. It can't be at the front of your mind. It has to be at the very back. And don't say that that's why the new objectives are going to happen. And I've seen people say, well, we're going to meet this because everything we've done before has helped us and we've ranged from this to this. I said, I don't want to hear that. This is where you pretend that you don't have a project and you have to explain to someone, well, moving forward, we think we're going to meet this objective because these are the specific services we have, that are going to happen. Okay. And then bite your tongue when you say or think, plus we've always met them before. You don't want to do that. You want to fight the pressure to set your percentages based on your outcomes on your APR. You're going to have to remember, keep that separate. And that's why it's sometimes better to have someone on the outside look at just your baseline and tell you, hey, if it were me, this is what I would set your objectives at. Without any knowledge about your APR, you know too much. You all know too much in a sense, and I don't mean that negatively, right? But in this case, you want to pretend you don't know how you've done because you got to look at just the baseline and see what you can, to an outsider, what they would think would be reasonable. They don't have that information and you don't want to give it to them either because they could use it against you too. Okay. So sometimes you volunteer information in here and say, well, we've met it in the past. It's been at this percentage. Or sometimes in the objective section, I said, I might repeat, okay, so the target schools, their graduation rate is only this compared to the state. And I said, ooh, I should have left that alone in the needs section. I only compare, do the comparison in the needs section. And when I go to the objective section, I said, as previously mentioned, the dropout rate or the college going rate for the target schools is only 30%. I don't want to bring up the comparison again, because if I say compared to the state, and I already won that battle, right? But if I bring it up in the objective section, the reader could say, oh, the state's at this much, and you're saying you're going to do this much. The applicant says they're going to be higher or lower than the state, and that could fall back. That could hurt you, all right? So you only want to bring up the baseline as your number and explain to the reader very clearly that you're going from this percentage to this percentage because of issues in that target area that were already explained, and throw in a couple of other examples from the needs section very briefly, and I'll show you there's a way to do that in the time that we have left. Yeah, we have 10 minutes left. But I don't say because of our APR. All right. And anything that you bring up in the objective section, you should have already mentioned in the needs section. Don't be saving any surprise percentages for the objective section thinking that's going to help you. No, it's a rehash of your need section. Okay. Rehash of the need, preview of the plan. And for EOC, it'd be 4 objectives, but you want to link all the required and some of the permissible services to all the 4 for EOC, 5 specific objectives. And that'll be as your answer as to how these are going to be attainable. Don't set them too high, too low. Easier said than done. The section is most likely to lose points. You want to use a format that's user friendly. I used to use a percentage increase. I'm going to use now, depending on the rigor of the objective and the baseline. I told you that before. Depending on how hard the objective is and what the current baseline data is, I definitely avoid setting increases higher than 20 percentage points. And the key is 20 percentage points, right? The acronym for that, or the abbreviation is PP. The optimal range is between 10 percentage points to 15 percentage points from the baseline. A percentage point, PP, represents the absolute arithmetic difference between 2 percentages. For example, and this is different from percentage increase or decrease, which refers to relative change rather than absolute difference in percentage points. Leticia, I know you're out there and you emailed me about this, right? And you asked me, where is that? And yes, in the past, I have used percentage change. I used to do from 5 to 10% would be 100% increase. I didn't do that, but I'd go with this type of math, and it confused the heck out of the readers and out of the clients. So I said, you know what? I'm going back to absolute arithmetic difference, the difference between the two, which means, I'll show you an example here. I want to make sure that I use that you all understand and that the reader understands that I'm going to use percentage point increase percentage point increase versus the percent increase. Okay, see the difference? Percentage point increase versus percent increase, and here's how they differ. Percentage point, PP increase, measures the absolute difference between 2 percentages. For example, if my baseline is going from 10, let's say it's my rigorous secondary school program of study, or how many of my high school, how many of my adults get in the target area get a GED on their own, is 10%. If I say my objective is going to be 15%, that is a 5 percentage point increase, not a 50% increase. Okay. Versus percent increase measures the relative change in percentage. So if I'm starting at 10% again, and if I say, this is what I used to do, and say that I'm going up to 15%, I couldn't even do that because look, the increase would be 50%, and that's way too high. So you see, and with EOC, it's very hard because EOC has extremely low baselines. So that's where I was like, this is going to be a problem if I use this type of math, because someone else could pick it up, and that's what happened. The reader said, oh, you're only going from 10 to 12%. That's only 2% difference. And it was like, no. And I told them, no, it's actually a 25% increase when I do it this way. It just got really hard to do it that way. Most readers were gravitating toward this absolute difference. So that's why I've gone back to absolute difference. So just talking about the percentage point increase, not percentage increase. Probably confused the heck out of y'all. And so again, you want to, so if I've got, for example, and on all this, also, this is the other thing real quick, people will say, or I see them on Facebook saying, hey, what's your college graduation rate? What do you have? What do you have? And people start like sharing their objectives that they're going to set. And I'm like, don't do that. What you have to talk about is, first, well, what's your baseline? So you really shouldn't be asking other directors what they're setting as their objective percentage. Maybe you should ask them, how much higher are you going from the baseline, right? See the difference? Because it all depends on when you're starting from. So for example, if without knowing anything else, just off the top of my head, if someone told me, Lisa, our college going rate right now is 40% of Talent Search kids go to college. then I would say, you know what? Let's go up to 55%, no higher than 55%. And I would say that's a 15 percentage point increase. See the difference from the 40 to the 55? And I would spell it out there to the reader like that in that fact. All right. So remember, when you're asking people for feedback, you got to make sure you give them first your actual baseline. So here's a recommended format to repeat the baseline and also bring up any other applicable need section information to stress why the percentage is so ambitious, right? But then you want to clearly also let them know that you're going to explain a proposed increase or improvement from the baseline data, okay? And that should be percentage point. And then you want to list the specific services and resources to help to achieve that. Okay, and this is just an example here. I picked on something. Well, this is persistence. I don't know if I have the one about the other objective. Let me see here. No, let me go back. Okay, I wanted to show something that was the same for similar to EOC. But here is the objective percentage for persistence. So I put this here, and this is how I would answer. This will result in this many percentage point increase. I use that from the baseline of this. So I show the math. Like, for example, just making it up, from 40 to 55% is a 15 percentage points increase. And then I say it's ambitious because the current baseline for the students at the target schools is this. Notice how I didn't compare it to anything else. The comparison I left in the needs section. I just said what it is. And then I brought up, you know what, by the way, this is also going to be ambitious because there's a high number of students on free and reduced lunch. And also I'm going to mention that the target school's performance, they performed below the state's academic performance index. So just as a reminder, but it was all about this. But I threw in a couple of nuggets, that were already in the needs section. So all this stuff ambitious is nothing new information. It's just a quick summary of what was in the needs section. And then I talk about, but it's going to happen because these are going to be the following specific project services and activities offered weekly and monthly as detailed on the plan of operations section of this proposal. And then I list the specific activities that relate to this objective. These will not be repeated again under any of the other objectives. Okay, and that's how I stress it there. And then again, we lost points because in the objective section, because I wasn't using the right baseline. I did not use the right baseline. And the reader said, I couldn't figure out if your percentage was high or too low because you didn't give me the right baseline. Specifically for Talent Search, I was using the cohort graduation rate of students that graduated, and I was supposed to go by just the 12th grade graduation rate. The same thing for rigorous. I lost points there on a couple proposals because the reader said, I didn't ask for the 9th through 12th grade graduation with rigorous. I just wanted the 12th grade only. And that's how the wording is for the objective. Remember when you did your APR, it was just about your seniors. How many of your seniors graduated with a regular diploma? It didn't say how many from 9th to 12th grade. And that's what I had given them as the baseline. So they were right. I was wrong. Okay. And then in another place, they showed that it was only, I was trying to use that different math last time around. The baseline was 13.5, which, by the way, I don't think this was me because I would have never utilized a partial baseline. I'm either going to round up or round down, right? So, but this client lost a point because 13.5 with a target rate of 15. Now, if I use the relative change, that's about a 20% increase. But they said, even though we said it, they said no, because it's only an increase of 1.5. So they were using the absolute math and I was using the relative change. So most people and readers will look for the absolute math, the absolute difference. So that's why I'm going to use percentage points. It is 1 o'clock right now. So I understand some of y'all have to leave, but I do have a little bit of time to answer those questions on quality of personnel, Donna. So if you could please bring up that question, that would be great.
Okay. Quality of personnel for EOC. Should we specifically indicate the number of years of experience for the staff?
You should mention a range of how many years of you require overall of any kind of trio or program working with talent search eligible students. See how I worded that? overall. I usually go, and I'm just throwing it out there. Like, for instance, I may say for a director, at least 5 years or more of that type of long-term experience with any kind of interaction or programming dealing with talent search eligible students. But then I say, but then out of those 5 years, 2 to 3 years have to be directly related in a supervisory or director position. But I never talk about the current people. I act as though if we were going to look for a whole new staff, what would we require? And yes, you have to be as specific as you can with the type of type of degree and the number of years. And again, this is another great question where sometimes we're thinking, oh, well, I have to do it this way because it was such a hard time finding someone to work in this area for that salary with that level. So let me make it for real. No, and that quality of personnel, you want to make sure, like with somebody in my client, they said, we're a nonprofit. So you know what, for our advisors, we put associate's degree required, bachelor's preferred. And I said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. You're good. But I said, you're going to lose points. I mean, if it's got to be that way, you just have to be okay with losing points here. Because I would be the first person telling the readers to take a point off if you don't require a bachelor's degree for your advisors. And if you don't require a master's degree for your director. Okay. Now, granted, this came from someone who didn't get her master's degree until after she left being a full-time trio director, but I was directing 5 programs with a bachelor's degree. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that people don't have the capability. I'm just saying it's so competitive that that'll be the easiest place and you'll have nowhere to stand and defend it by losing that point. So what I'm saying is you go with what's going to get you funded. And then when you have a vacancy, you try to do it that way and document that you tried to hire for that level, with that minimum required degree. And once you run into a roadblock and can document that, then you contact your program specialist and say, look, I'm having an issue. I'm not able to fill that position. Can you allow me, could you consider this person with years of experience? Okay. And again, if you are existing, you can afford to lose some points. So leave it alone then. Leave it with with no years specified or with a bachelor's degree required, master's degree preferred for the director. But don't be surprised if this time around you lose points. But if you have enough points, you can still survive. If you're worried about your needs section taking a hit with the points and you don't have the luxury of having a lot of points left over to offset what could possibly happen, in the quality of personnel, then you have to strategically say, okay, let's go for the higher degree required and we'll worry about it later. Okay. I'm just keeping it real. Leticia, sorry to call you out, but no, it's a great thing. And you thank you, because you made me think, you know what, I need to talk about the objectives and I need to talk about that difference. Okay. And when you go back and look at this recording, you can also Google that and get a better explanation perhaps on the difference with the two, but I definitely am moving toward the absolute difference instead of the relative change, because that was confusing a lot of folks. Okay. And I can see the questions now. So CAS of something about internal evaluation. That's fine if you want to use CAS for internal evaluation, but remember, I might be, as a reader, looking for what you're doing externally, or who are you having come look at it externally. It could be someone from another department on campus. CAS to me is more appropriate for SSS and McNair, not necessarily for talent search, but if you can explain to me, tell me why you think it's appropriate, and I will consider that. MOUs should be between our college, who's the grantee, and our community partners, or between EOC project and the partner. The MOUs, great, should be between your college or your agency and the partner. And of course, you mentioned for the, as XYZ College is requesting this letter, so of an MOU between the college and our project, so you can mention it. But yes, it should not be from the project director asking the community partner for a letter. It should be the college for the project is asking. Okay. And you want to get those letters, and because the idea is you're supposed to have them at your office before you submit. You don't submit the letters with them, but you have to have them on with you. You have to have them in your office because it should be on demand. You should be able to produce those letters of commitment, but they don't go in with the proposal. Can we use the words first generation and low income? Or should you say talent search eligible in our response? Great question. You should switch over whenever possible to say talent search eligible, EOC eligible students. Okay. I know it's in the question, but I don't have to use it in my answer. Okay. So which is different. It used to be, hey, that's what they used, use their same words. Now I can't say that anymore. That's one of the biggest changes. I have to look at the wording and say, I can use that, but not, or I'm not worried. Or sometimes, y'all, I've been taking the questions and putting them in Chat GPT and saying, I need different words. And I upload those lists of trigger words and I upload the executive orders. And it's telling me, look, if it were me, it's acting like a reader. It's acting like an editor, like the most, editor that's just checking me and says, you know what, instead of this, you should use this, and this is why. Okay, so that's where I'm learning how to change some of the wording in my answers so that content or the meaning pretty much stays the same as to what the question's asking without me doing it. So is it best to use percentage point increase for the comparison in the needs section and the objective section as well? Well, I don't bring up the percentage point. Well, I show the percentage point difference. Yes, I use absolute math. So I always say, look, in the needs section, I said the baseline for the target schools is this compared to state and national rates. But that's it. I don't explain the math. I clearly show the math and say that this is higher at 30% compared to 20 or 10% for the nation or the state or the other way around. But I don't go into it there. I don't show the difference anymore in the needs section. I focus on showing the difference or the increase, the percentage point increase in the objective section. Okay. I don't know if that makes sense, but I don't do it in both sections. Okay. It's more important for you to show your increase from the baseline in the objective section than it is to show the mathematical difference in the needs section. As long as there is, I try to make sure that our target school and our target area is at least 5 percentage points doing worse or better, depending on the situation, always worse than the comparison area. If not, I kick it back to the client and I said, there's not enough need. You're at, you're at 29% and the state's at 30%. That's only a 1 point, that doesn't show a lot of need, so you want to make it sure it's a little bit more in a gap. Do EOC programs use target schools or is it the only used for talent search? You could, I mean, I don't know if you mean use overall, like when you get up and running, if you can work with high school students, you are allowed to, if there's not a talent search program in the area and they still qualify. But if you wanted to base your baseline on college enrollment, college admissions, if there's not a talent search program in that area, you could use target school, high school. You could use high school information for that. I mean, again, the intent is adults, so I don't want you to completely go there. But if you wanted to use that as your baseline and you had no other way to get it for adults, yes, but you have that. It's just that if you're going for continued EOC funding, you might have a little bit more breathing room in case you lose a point there. A reader says, well, this should be about the adults and not the high schools. But if you point out that, hey, there's not a talent search program in these areas, and we'll be working with a lot of these students or some of the students, then possibly yes. Okay. All righty. So that's all the questions there. Thank you all so much. If you want to get a chance to look at this, it'll be in the recording. And then also if you want to do some research on the difference between absolute change difference versus relative change, you might want to check that out. Okay. Or sign up for our grant writing workshop and you can have that PowerPoint and also some resource materials and hear us go on and on about it for an hour and a half. Okay. Thank you all so much. Y'all take care. Thanks, Leticia. I didn't mean to call you out, but you actually helped me because I was wondering what should I talk about this session. So bring it on, okay? And thank you for being my guinea pig. I love you.